Football fans in Argentina have joined forces with an unlikely group to protest President Javier Milei's government. Pensioners. That's right. Football fans joined the retirees who have been protesting Milei's economic policies, including pension cuts, every week for several months. Riot police in Buenos Aires used tear gas, rubber bullets, and water cannons to disperse the demonstrators. However, thousands more joined the protests after footage of elderly people being hit with batons and knocked to the ground went viral on social media. Protesters surrounded the police, shouting, "Don't touch the elderly." Nearly 90 people were detained and 15 taken to hospital. Javier Milei is a former TV pundit turned politician who describes himself as an anarcho-capitalist and libertarian. Shortly after being elected, he issued a string of executive orders eviscerating Argentina's public sector with little to no consideration for the fallout. This included shutting down the entire housing ministry, despite the country suffering a homelessness crisis. He also used his position as president to endorse a cryptocurrency, not a red flag at all, which then immediately collapsed, causing people to lose millions of dollars. Now, if all of this is sounding a little Doge-coded, that's because it is. Milei's brand of chainsaw capitalism, which involves shredding the state almost overnight and imposing fiscal shocks, is seen by many as a precursor to the latest iteration of Trumpism. He even gifted Elon Musk a chainsaw at CPAC last month, with Musk telling the audience that it was a chainsaw for bureaucracy. So catchy. While Trump and Musk yell and squeal and compare the size and vigor of their chainsaws on a national stage, an additional 5 million people in Argentina have been pushed into poverty by Milei's policies. When Milei vetoed a law that would increase pensions by 8%, a fraction of the increase needed to keep up an annual inflation rate of 200%, many pensioners felt this was a death sentence. One protesting pensioner told France 24 this: "You think, why does someone who is leading a country have to shut down your life? It's as if they told you, don't eat, don't buy medicine, just die." Helena, are we likely to see any more unlikely coalitions emerging as this kind of Milei, Trump, Musk-esque form of chainsaw capitalism ripples more throughout the world?
I hope we do. I think we probably should do. And I think this very specific alliance is very instructive to us here in the UK as well. Now, football fans have notoriously, historically been incredibly political, especially in the United Kingdom. It's always been a very political sport. You look at Hillsborough and Liverpool fans and all that kind of stuff. You look at the campaign against the Glazers within Manchester. There's always been a political element to the football supporters of this country. I mean, it's been famously so. And so it's now a time to try and claw as many disparate groups of people together in service of a political cause as we possibly can. One of the things that neoliberalism has taught us to is to be individualized and to be atomized and not show solidarity with each other, not try and form bonds between communities to fight for a larger cause. And that's something that we should be trying to fight against and bring together all of these people, so it's very tempting. And I've seen lots of people do this, lots of young people, right, in the wake of the means testing of the winter fuel allowance for pensioners by the government last year. I've seen lots of young people who can't get their head out of this individualized bubble, saying things like, well, it's means tested, so it doesn't actually matter. Pensioners are richer than us, so why should we be giving out handouts for millionaires, when they're forgetting about the people who are just above the line, or the fact that you could also do a tax taper to be able to ensure that those who are genuinely rich and don't need it can pay tax to be able to undo the fact they received that payment in the first place, to ensure that every pensioner gets access to the fact that they need to heat their homes more than other people because they are more fragile, because they are older, right? That level of solidarity is what we need to be seeing. And I've seen lots of young people actually broadly across polling with regards to this issue actually genuinely still support the elderly in receiving the winter fuel payment. It hasn't been totally well received by even the parts of the electorate that are not affected by it. There's still this level of solidarity and empathy. And we need to see more of this across different sectors of society. We also have a word of warning with regards to what we're looking at with regards to what's happening in Argentina. This isn't anything new, by the way. This kind of seesawing between kind of free market fundamentalism and kind of protectionist economic policy, that's been part and parcel of Argentinian economics for almost the best part of the last century. And no matter which way they go, it always seems to end towards economic disaster. It's not specific to the kind of politics that has been espoused by the government of the day in Argentina that's led them to have these kind of cyclical crises. I've been reading an interesting paper today by Darren Esemolu and a bunch of other economists talking about the fact that because of the colonial nature of a lot of Latin American states, especially in Argentina, they never built the kind of inclusive institutions that allow for a more collective voice to be able to be strong in creating a stable country and a stable polity ever since the times of colonialism. Unlike in a lot of the North American ones, where a lot of the native population was wiped out by colonialism, and the institutions were set up to protect the colonists or to be able to be inclusive for the colonists. In South America, where a lot of the colonial occupations of these areas had to live with and amongst the subjects that were being colonized, they created institutions that were to benefit and to tyrannize the colonized populations. And what happened was none of those oligarchic institutions of old to protect the colonists went away. And so you never had an inclusive economy, you never had a properly democratic countries in South America. And what this led to was centralized and cyclical power relations where the people at the top continued to amass power and to be able to self-reify that system over time. What are we seeing in America now? We're seeing a centralized control in the hands of an oligarchy. We are seeing a complete desecration of institutions and of democratic norms to try and centralize power in the hands of the richest and the most elite and the most misanthropic elements of American society. Now, this is not necessarily anything kind of broadly different to what American society has had for definitely the last 50 years since Reagan. It's certainly an acceleration of it towards something that is transparently anti-democratic. Will this be good for regular people in America? Of course not. They're looking at cutting social security just in the way that Milei is right now in Argentina, almost certainly along the same kind of lines. And this won't just be bad for the American kind of democracy in the short term, it'll be bad for the American economy in the long term, as that kind of centralized power, as we've seen with the history of Argentina, is very, very difficult to dismantle. And that will have long-term consequences for everybody, and not just in America, but the world over. This is why the maintenance of democracy as a fundamental institution in a country that is representative and inclusive is the most important part. And we're seeing this being frittered away in America, and it could come to Western economies next.
Yeah, absolutely. And that forming coalitions, forming a political allegiances and alliance and teams, essentially forming a big team that is based not on shared identity, but on shared interests is the only way forward here. And I think historically, unions and even some attempts at more kind of progressive electoral projects have been quite good at that. We have that in our history. We have that including in our recent history, as what we can broadly describe as the left. And I think drawing on that history that we do have is going to be absolutely essential moving forward, because so many different groups of people are going to be dispossessed by this kind of chainsaw capitalism, and being able to articulate those shared interests in a clear and inclusive way is going to be absolutely essential. We've been here before and we can do it again, is essentially the point I made. And also the thing with Latin America that I think is quite interesting. I mean, we all also remember that Latin America was the birthplace of neoliberalism, right? And it feels like it's also now the birthplace of this later iteration of neoliberalism that we are seeing. And sort of staying abreast of those developments and the new coalitions and sort of interests that is generating is going to be incredibly important going forward when it comes to strategy.